Hey guys, giving away a Nintendo Switch and a free game on the channel this month. All you need to do is like, subscribe, and hit the bell on the channel and leave a comment down below. That comment can be anything you like. And if you like leaving comments, Claytano, my good friend Claytano, is giving away a PS4 on his channel, and you have to do the same thing. So just go comment on his channel too, and you get entered into a PS4 draw. So this video is going to be about popular meta compositions, a bit of advice about how to build them, but specifically talking a lot about the counters for these particular builds, because this is something that people have asked me to do for quite a long time now. I'm back home now, by the way, so should have a good audio quality, and we should be back to normal level of videos. So we're going to start off with Beast Warrior, probably one of the most popular warrior compositions in the game. The 6 units that I think are the core are at the top, and then you can add either 4 beasts with Poisonous Worm and Razor Claw, or you can add a marine bonus, which would bring you up to 7 units, and then you can add pretty much whatever you want after that as well. I either add a utility piece like Devastator or Helicopter or whatever. But that's my general ethos when it comes to building Beast Warrior. Pretty easy build. I've put this down as difficulty easy because it's really just about buying warriors, and then you can replace the cheaper warriors with your more expensive warriors like Berserker, Doom, and Pirate Captain, or you can even just transition into a 9 warrior build which has its own strengths and weaknesses compared to Beast Warrior. But this is generally a really solid build. It's countered by 9 warriors, doesn't have the damage. Goblins generally do well against Beast Warrior. Feathered and Divinity builds do well against Beast Warrior. It kind of goes even, but it's ever so slightly countered by mages. It can be a bit hit or miss depending on the items that you have in your Poisonous Worm and how many levels you've got on your units. Assassins generally tend to lose to Beast Warrior, but if they've got stacked assassins, it can be a bit of a pain. And Beast Warrior beats Hunters most of the time, and it beats Knights most of the time. So that's the Beast Warrior build counter list. Assassins. This is really the one assassin build that I think is the best right now. You can replace things with Soulbreaker if you like, but I think this is just the core 8, level 8, 6 assassin with Warpwood Sage and Razor Claw build that I think most people play. It's a pretty easy build to play because you can just build assassins from the start. Soulbreaker, if you can get into level 2, can act as just a placeholder assassin until you get a stronger assassin subbed in, or you can just use it instead of something like Water Spirit or Lord of Sand. I wouldn't recommend that you use Venom unless you've got a lot of excess mana generation items. Venom with mana generation items can be incredibly strong. Venom without mana generation items is pretty weak overall, if I'm completely honest with you. So I would say that Venom is not a great assassin to add to this 6 assassin build. You have no need to level past level 8 with assassins. You want to just 3-star your assassins that you've got. A priority set of 3 stars should be Abyssal Crawler, it should be Shadow Crawler, it should be Phantom Queen and Water Spirit, the cheaper ones. Wouldn't really worry about 3-starring Lord of Sand. He's there primarily for the CC, and you can obviously 3-star Soulbreaker if you find him. Assassins are generally countered by pretty much everything. The only builds that they do consistently well against are Hunters and Mages, but everything else like Feathered Warriors, Beast Warriors, Goblins, Knights, and even Divinity to an extent, tend to beat assassins. But that comes down to whether you've got a lot of 3 stars and what items you've got on your assassins, because assassins are a build that can beat anything if you've got a really snowbally build, but lose to a lot of things if you don't. So if you've got loads of 3 stars, assassins can beat pretty much anything, but if you are struggling, then it generally tends to lose to quite a lot as well. So that's assassins in a nutshell, realistically. Alright, having a look at Glacier Knight now. Glacier Knight is a very strong comp right now due to the addition of the Fortune Teller. So my preferred build is Desperate Doctor, Fortune Teller, Berserker, Frost Knight, Hell Knight, Evil Knight, Lightblade Knight, and then Soulbreaker. That gives us the Agursis bonus and the Warlock bonus. Now, if you want to go to level 9 and get rid of the Warlock bonus, you can bring in the 2 extra Knights to go for a 6-Knight Glacier build, which will make you slightly stronger against mages. Or you can go to level 10 and include all of them, and that makes it a pretty powerful build overall. Some people like to include a Defector over Priest. Personal preference, I think. I prefer Priest most of the time, especially at level 2. I think I prefer Defector if my Priest is only level 1. So that's kind of how I think about it. You can build Knights from the start. They're a pretty good build to go into. All your damage goes onto Lightblade Knight. All your defense usually goes onto Hell Knight. You focus on 3-starring Hell Knight and Lightblade Knight. Lightblade Knight is your damage source here. So Glacier Knights generally gets countered by 9 warriors, and to an extent a lot of warrior comps, also countered by feathered pretty heavily, fairly heavily countered by goblins. It really depends on itemization. If you get a level 3 Hell Knight and a level 3 Lightblade Knight, you can probably beat a lot of goblin comps, but otherwise goblins will beat you. And then Divinity generally tend to do well. I would say that Glacier Knight tends to do well against mages, hunters, and assassins. Mages can be a bit hit or miss, it really depends, because your backline is fairly squishy, but I would say most of the time, especially if you get Hell Knight pretty stacked, you can do well against mages. So this is my favourite comp in the meta right now. This is Feathered, and you can build 2 variants of Feathered. The core units in my eyes are Taboo Witcher, Warpwood Sage, Whisper Seer, the Wind Ranger, and Razor Claw. Then you can either go into Assassins and pick up 2 feathered in the form of Shadow Crawler and Templar Assassin, not Templar Assassin, Shining Assassin, and then add another Assassin to get that 3 Assassin bonus. I prefer Lord of Sand most of the time. Or you can go Hunters and pick up Shining Archer, Lightblade Knight, and then add in a Siren. Now, I like Lightblade Knight because I just think it's the most consistent form of damage, and with Knights not being too popular, it's pretty easy to get to 2-star and eventually 3-star if you want to. I would say it's better than something like Shadow Crawler or Shining Assassin, simply because it's just a bit more of a consistent damage output. Now, I've put Feathered as hard. The reason I put Feathered as hard is because generally you have to lose streak or open 4 into them. You've only got one cost unit. Everything else is 2 cost plus, and most of your core units are 3 costs, so you don't actually end up finding a lot of them until you're at least level 6 or 7. So it's much, much easier to actually lose streak into this with an economy, which makes it a little bit of a harder build to go. The only direct counter to Feathered are 6 Hunters, and that really depends on how stacked your Shadow Crawler is. I would say that Goblins, 9 Warriors, and Divinity all do pretty well into Feathered. They just don't, like, Feathered just don't have the damage to deal with the armor from the Goblins, and they just don't have the damage to deal with the armor from the 9 Warriors. I would say they go even with Mages. It really depends on if you've got a level 2 Shining Assassin and how well stacked your Shadow Crawler is, and they generally tend to beat most other warrior compositions that aren't 9 Warriors, Knights, and Assassins. Those are the comps that you'll do really well against if you're playing Feathered. Alright, moving on to Hunters, and Hunters are definitely a very interesting set of builds. I haven't included much advice with these guys because I just wanted to put the 3 Hunter builds in that are probably the most popular right now. I would say the number 1 Asia build is that I've done a video on before, you can see at the top, and that's a 3 Hunter build that includes the Venomancer for Armor Shred, and then also the Warlock bonus. There's the normal 3 Hunter Warrior build, which includes Werewolf, Doom, and Pirate Captain with no Venomancer, although you could just add Venomancer in afterwards at level 8. And then there's the 6 Hunter build, which generally uses Soul Reaper and then Pirate Captain, and it's more about the flat damage. In general, Hunters do well against Feathered. They do pretty well against Mages. They go even, I think, with Knights, though it really depends on the levels of the Lightblade Knight and the Hell Knight that you're facing up against, and whether you're facing 4 Knights or 6 Knights. And I would say that with good positioning can sometimes go pretty even against Divinity, as long as God of Thunder isn't stacked up. They generally get countered by Assassins, most Warrior comps because the damage reduction kind of nullifies their perk, and also Goblins generally tend to beat Hunters because you just don't have the burst damage to get through them. I would say, though, any composition that relies on squishy units, with low HP targets, Hunters do well against that right now due to the Dwarf Sniper changes. So anything that relies on a squishy target in the backline to deal its damage, Dwarf Sniper, especially if you get him to level 3, can really put the pain on those types of builds. So that's what makes, I think, Dwarf Sniper a pretty invaluable addition. You can actually replace Dwarf Sniper with Wind Ranger in any of these compositions if you want to as well, so don't feel like you have to stick to Dwarf Sniper. Let's go on to Mages. There's 2 major mage comps right now. I would say Human Mages and God Mages. They do have slightly different counters, and I'll talk about those when we go through it. Human Mages are not that good right now. Personally, I don't think so. I don't think Human Mages are great. I think in general 3 mage builds are not that good, and 6 mages too hard to go for. God Mages are the best mage build, but they're also the most contested mage build, and can be quite difficult to get online, and really rely on God of Thunder to make work. I would say it's a medium composition difficulty because it requires a lot of balancing of economy and knowing when to roll, knowing when to all in to look for your core units. It is a fairly difficult build to get right. They are good versus any of the builds that rely on armor and can't deal with burst damage. I'm talking about Goblins and Warriors. That's what the mages in general beat Goblins and Warriors really hard. I would say they go even with Feathered. I would say that Human Mages if you have a good Storm Shaman Silence, can do really well into God Mages, so that's why I've put them kind of on the soft counter on the middle there. Obviously, Divinity versus Divinity is a 50-50 matchup depending on what units you've got. And I'd say that Hunters do well into Mages with good positioning, especially with the Dwarf Sniper changes, because Dwarf Sniper can snipe off your backline really nicely. Assassins do well, and then 6 Knight compositions. I would say that 4 Knight compositions depends on how stacked the Hellblade Knight, the Hell Knight and the Lightblade Knight are. 6 Knight comps, like Dragon Knights, generally do pretty well into Mages because they have a lot of magic resist built up with those shields. And speaking of Dragon Knights, it's the final comp that I want to go over. Pretty simple one to do, actually. You just pick up the 4 Knights of Frost Knight, Lightblade Knight, Hell Knight, and Evil Knight. Sorry, 6 Knights. You just pick up all the Bloody Knights. Just pick up all the Knights, then just add a Venom and a Shining Dragon, and you've got your Dragon Knight comp online. And then at level 9, you can add a Soul Reaper, and if you want to add another Warlock at level 10, that's good too. Again, as with all Knight compositions, you want to focus on 3-starring Hell Knight and 3-starring Lightblade Knight. They generally tend to lose to feathered warriors, 9 warriors especially, and goblins. They can go pretty decently against beast warriors, but in general, those are the comps that will beat them. Glacier Knights also does pretty well into Dragon Knights, depending on items and depending on levels of Lightblade Knights and so on and so forth. But I would say that because the Warlock bonus makes them quite difficult to take down, they kind of nullify the damage over time from the Dragon Knight, that Glacier Knights do well into Dragon Knights. I would say you can go pretty even with Divinity, even with God of Thunder now, due to the nerfs. Dragon Knight can carry you through that. Level 3 God of War, it will make it difficult, but anything other than a level 3 God of War, I would actually say Dragon Knights are pretty good in Divinity. And I would say the Dragon Knights beat Mages, they beat Assassins, and they beat Hunters in general. It's a pretty solid build all round. Has very few glaring weaknesses apart from the fact that Beast Warrior and Feathered are in the meta right now, and that makes it quite difficult to play them because, again, they kind of beat you in the mid-game. Right, that's fantastic. That's everything. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And if you missed any builds, I know I missed things like Goblin, and I know I missed things like 9 Warrior, but they're pretty self-explanatory, and from the other charts, you can kind of work out where they sit. If you want me to add those next time, I will do, but just let me know. Alright guys, see you soon.